Okay, great. So welcome everyone. And this is Gerald's fault that we're doing it this way because we had Ellen Yaroshevsky, who's a professor at NYU and an expert on prosecutorial ethics, had been on the schedule to do this webinar for today, but she had to move it to next month due to a conflict. So I happened to be in an email conversation with Gerald and said if he'd be open for an open mic day. And he said yes. So if you don't like this format, you can blame Gerald. It's all his fault. But I wanted to give folks a chance now that we're about 6 months into my working with everybody to let folks have an opportunity to kind of share what you've been doing on the project that you're working with, share successes that you are having that you want to kind of brag about a bit, as well as any challenges that you'd like people's feedback on to do kind of here in this group together. So kind of like our first webinar where we did just going around and kind of explaining what the project is, how it's going. And I think people really appreciate hearing from each other what is happening in other places in the country. And then just kind of sharing about upcoming webinars that we have set up for the next couple months. And then to get your feedback on having an in-person conference in the fall at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been talking to the folks at BJA about doing that. I think it would be something that would be very beneficial to everybody on both on this grant and on the grant coming up. And I think we could do a really good job of putting together some top-notch programming for people to kind of provide that opportunity to come together. So that's that. The only other intro thing I just wanted to share was if you missed the webinar yesterday with BJA about applying for the FY20 Rule of Law grant, I can certainly send you that link. But just so everybody knows, the criteria is different now under the new FY20 grant. It has essentially gone back to what it was initially, which is a wrongful conviction grant aimed at what BJA calls wrongful conviction review entities. So those would be traditional innocence organizations, could be a public defender's office or a nonprofit looking to set up a post-conviction review program in their office. It's not, so in other words, prosecutors' offices are not eligible to apply as grantees, but of course you can work with an innocence organization to put together a project and essentially be a sub-grantee under that program, and the innocence organization would be the one applying for the grant and then administering it as well. But I'm happy to talk to folks about that either here in this webinar with people or just send the link to that from yesterday if you want. I just wanted to kind of get that out there because I know there's some confusion given the way this program has kind of bounced around over the last couple of years. So there we are. If anybody has questions on that, please feel free to either chat it through or just kind of shout out. But I'm gonna go down the list that I have here and just welcome people to kind of tell us about how you're doing and where you are on this. I see, Gerald, I already picked on you once, so I'll pick on you again. How's the program going? What successes do you want to shout out, or any challenges you want to ask for assistance on, or just kind of give an update on how you're doing?
So our grant is out of FY 2018. It's actually with the Innocence Project of Texas. And there's a third participant, an innocence organization based here in Houston, the Anthony Graves Foundation. And purpose of the grant was for the partnership among the three of us to look at post-conviction claims of innocence that could perhaps be supported by DNA evidence and testing under the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Chapter 64. So we focused on a range of cases from 2001 to 2008 in Harris County, which consisted of about 325 cases. We pretty much did an open file sharing with our grant partners of the work that our office did on those cases. And out of those cases, we've identified actually 30 cases that we think merit further testing DNA testing, either because of newer testing techniques or things that should have been tested that wasn't tested initially. We've identified those, and frankly, the ball is in the Innocence Project of Texas's court at the moment, and they're reaching out to the various defendants who were involved in those cases to get their consent to proceed with testing the evidence. And they are in the process of coming up with a form letter to send to those defendants. So that's where we are. Challenges because of the date of those cases has been finding property. We've been fortunate to find property in most of those cases, about 2/3 of those cases that we've identified. So once we get the consent from the defendants to proceed, we'll be sending those items of evidence to the lab, which we've identified to work with to test. So that's where we are right now.
Harold, I have a question. This is Cynthia.
Yeah.
How did you identify those cases? Did you start off with a pool of cases where they had requested Chapter 64 testing, or did you start off with a pool of cases that where your lab had conducted DNA testing, or how did you identify those?
Yeah, so good question, Cynthia. So it really was a pool of cases where Chapter 64 testing was denied, or may have been granted, but looking at it, it looks like there are newer testing techniques available that could be probative. Most of the cases were cases where Chapter 64 testing was denied, and it was prior to the formation of our conviction integrity unit. Those cases were looked at by post-conviction writs division in our office and denied for a variety of reasons. So that's the pool of cases we wanted to relook at.
Okay.
Gerald, this is Marissa. If you could just kind of tell folks, and one thing I find very intriguing about this particular project is that your office has taken a very different take on DNA requests now than you had before. And my understanding is that now the DNA requests as they come in go directly to your unit and for evaluation and processing. Am I saying that correctly?
You are saying it correctly.
And how do you,
the only
how do you
exception is if a writ's been filed, then our post-conviction writs division will handle that Chapter 64 request as part of the writ. But you're correct. No writ has been filed. It comes directly to us, and we handle it.
And what is your procedure in terms? Do you have more of a just grant everything as long as there's a nexus to the crime position, or do you do some kind of other analysis in terms of whether to agree to testing now if it comes in?
Yeah, so it's going to be the nexus to the crime, and frankly, under Chapter 64, there are certain requirements that have to be met. One is that identity was an issue, so we do look at that, and then and frankly, that the results of the testing are going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. So those are the two sort of initial threshold questions we look at. I will say we're pretty generous in our view of that. We don't push back a whole lot, but at the same time, we're not looking to jam up our labs with a lot of unnecessary testing. And I think that has helped with establishing a good relationship with our labs, that we're not just going to open up the floodgates there on them. There's going to be some thresholds that have to be met.
So thank you. Do folks have any questions or suggestions for Gerald in terms of this particular project and how they're going, or would you have a different take on it if it came through your office? I think is one thing I'm kind of curious. And I'm looking at Sarah, who, just so you know, you're on deck, because I know your office is kind of similar in terms of taking the DNA cases. and whether there's any feedback for Gerald on the project that they're doing.
Well, I guess it's somewhat similar, although we've been, I think, had that process for a period of time where we've...
To interrupt you, just so folks know, this is Sarah DeSimone. She's with the, oh my gosh, blanking on your county.
Middlesex County.
Thank you, in Massachusetts. She runs their conviction integrity unit. Thanks, Sarah.
So we have had somewhat of a longer standing relationship with our Innocence program with Lisa Kavanaugh and Innocence Project, Radha Natarajan, who are also grantees, working together regarding what in Massachusetts is 278A motions requests for DNA evidence and forensic evidence. It's not just DNA, but it would be any forensic evidence. And we've been handling the motions, and we work together fairly collaboratively with our Innocence programs in handling those motions. And similarly, probably to what Gerald said, some of the considerations are not only a claim of innocence, but also whether that the forensic testing requested would go towards the identity of the perpetrator, the defendant as the perpetrator of the crime, as well as other considerations as to whether their liberty has been restrained and that everything contained in the statute. But we're also fairly liberally reading the statute as to assist in any discovery or investigation that might be involved prior to that request for testing. So we're working together with counsel to try to effectuate that, and then also working together to try to come up with joint motions motions where it falls within that statute.
So it is interesting to me that while I think most CIUs have a fairly generous agreement to test DNA policy, there's still some kind of gray areas where each organization or each office kind of puts their own stamp on it, which is just an interesting take on it, at least from my perspective, because I work with so many all around the country. Sarah, while I have you, would you go next in terms of your progress on the grant? I know you guys have had some challenges in terms of wanting to revamp a bit as you go through, because you're finding you need things that are different from what you may have anticipated. If you're comfortable sharing that with folks, I think that would be interesting for people to learn about that.
Sure. I think we're still evaluating some of our utilization of the funds. I think that so many ideas have come up through this project of how best to use the funds for the purpose of the grant towards wrongful convictions. I know that the other grantees, Innocence Project, Innocence Program, I don't see either of them on the call today. So just to let you know that their side are working a lot towards data and tracking data. Our office is considering how to best potentially use our funds toward data. The funding initially was going towards staffing, and we're rethinking that about usage towards data, but also access to defendants to information and to accessing requests for forensic evidence. So we're also considering ways to revamp our website and intake program and intake sheets to try to make sure that it's more accessible, for instance, a pro se defendant, which causes other challenges, how to make sure that this is a program that's accessible to anyone, whether you have representation or not.
Right. And just want to kind of put in a little plug here for next month's webinar, because that's going to be a big focus. Talking with Professor Yarshevsky is particularly for prosecutors, some of the ethical issues involved when you're dealing with a pro se litigant, all the issues that they should be aware of when entering into an agreement or any kind of relationship directly with the prosecutor's office, and trying to make sure that you have done your best to inform the pro se litigant on all the issues involved in working with the prosecutor's office, what they may or may not be being asked to give up in terms of confidentiality or attorney-client privilege, and then when to involve an outside counsel, if at all, in that relationship as you kind of move forward, because we think that there are a lot of ethical issues that just have not really been addressed yet in kind of pursuing some of these issues, and that's something that Professor Yarshevsky has been putting a lot of thought into. So just to kind of flag for next month. And also, if you are working on that issue in terms of what kind of, how your letters look, what the wording is, any kind of questionnaires or petitions that you're sending out. We'd very much like to help with that. We're trying to kind of collect as many of those as we can as templates to have available for other prosecutors' offices looking to set up conviction integrity units. And we've also worked with a number of sociologists, linguists, and even formerly incarcerated people to try to make sure that those petitions and questionnaires, whatever's going out from the prosecutors' offices in particular to the prisons, can be easily read, understood, answered by the pro se litigants, and that you're getting information back that is particularly helpful for you and is able to kind of move you forward in your process. So I would be very happy to help with that if that's something that you guys want. Sorry, Sarah, I kind of jumped in on your time.
I think that would be helpful. Another thing that I think would be helpful in that regard is we've talked about it, I think, in one of our first webinar about accessing the trial attorney's folder and how that can be a really important tool. And I know other grantees have talked about being able to access that. That's something that's not really happening much in, at least in Massachusetts, in Innocence, but I think that that would be helpful to discuss that waiver that would entail releasing that information and the agreement and why that can be, and the reasons why that would be beneficial to a defendant to view the process as to from the trial defense counsel side as well.
Right. And that's also something that so what we're really trying to put together here is kind of like a toolkit to go to prosecutors and defense counsel of all the issues that need to be considered with working with defendants in terms of making sure they understand all their rights, what's going on, and why that accessibility, Sarah, like you just said, would be helpful for the prosecutor to have. And I don't see her on here, but Lisa Kavanaugh, yep, I don't think she's with us right now, but she is actually works on the Innocence Network, which for those who don't know is kind of a loose affiliation of innocence organizations around the world. And they have a best practices ethics guidelines for innocence organizations to follow. And she and I are working on putting together a section for innocence organizations on working with prosecutors. And Professor Yarshevsky and I are also putting together that same kind of work list, as I said, for prosecutors working with pro se litigants and defense counsel. So that's kind of the area that we're moving toward right now. So hopefully within a month or two, we'll have some pretty solid recommendations for folks, as well as checklists and templates for you to follow.
I think that would be really helpful. It'd be great, Marissa. Thank you.
That's what I like to hear, Sarah. Thanks. Anything else from your end? Oh, in terms of just the project, any successes you want to share or challenges you'd like some feedback on?
I think we've been building on a relationship we already had. So I just think the more we have discussions, I think the more beneficial it is, not only within our own group of grantees with the Innocence Project, Innocence Program, as well as the DA's office, but to hear from all of the other counties that are the grantees, I think is beneficial. Information sharing is, I think, one of the most beneficial aspects of the grant.
Oh, good. Okay. Great. And have you been able to kind of work or directly communicate with folks in the grant other than outside of these webinars, just kind of emailing or something, or is that something you'd like us to work on?
I haven't contacted anyone independently outside the grant, but I think that could be helpful.
Okay. And I apologize for what sounds like elephants upstairs. I'm directly underneath my daughter's room, and I don't know what the hell they're doing up there, but it's driving me crazy. So like that, I apologize. But we'll keep going around. Bill Oberly, I see you hanging out here from Alaska. How's it going from out there?
Well, I'm not self-quarantining, so I guess it's going okay. As you know, Marissa, we have kind of a different program than I think most have. Our goal is the same, to identify and work on cases of wrongful conviction, but we're trying to find what we think is a group of convictions in rural Alaska that has been undiscovered, most specifically Alaska Natives. It's going okay. We made presentations in all of the sentence facilities and got a number of responses, a bunch of responses to that. Now we're trying to get into the communities to see about wrongful convictions that are known to people in the communities that we don't know about. And that's a little more of a challenge. I was really hoping to talk to people at the upcoming network conference about this, but we'll be talking alone in that because we won't have the conference. But it's a challenge, but we're starting to move forward on that.
So, Bill, so for those who don't know, there is a conference that the Innocence Network, again, this kind of loose affiliation of innocence organizations, puts on every year that had been scheduled for Chicago at the end of this month. We just got notification that they canceled that. But Bill, I would be happy to kind of talk with you about potentially putting together an online meeting if you think that would be helpful for you with other groups that are working with Native populations. And we can certainly help coordinate that if that would be helpful for you.
Well, we can talk about that because I proposed, what seems like a long time ago now, a Indigenous persons work group amongst the members of the Innocence Network who have substantial Indigenous populations in their state and amongst the people they work with. And I have the names and I'm going to recontact these people to kind of regenerate that. So it may, I hadn't thought about the help that the Portrone Center can provide, but yeah, let's talk about that. That's a good idea.
And I don't know if any of the other grantees, particularly those on this call, deal with Indigenous populations in particular. But if you do, I'm thinking more Native American or Alaska Native as Bill does, but if there are folks who work with those populations that have difficulty reaching them or difficulty communicating with them, and that's something you want to talk about, by all means, please let me know and we would include you in that planning as well. But yeah, so Bill's project is unique and he has unique challenges, including very disparate geographic settings of having to get around in different ways to get to the folks he needs to see. So if there are other folks who have similar challenges, Bill is somebody you probably would want to check in with as now a resident expert on getting around.
Yeah, please, definitely. If anybody on the call has issues with their Indigenous populations and working with them from either side, from the defense or the prosecution side in trying to find wrongful convictions, I would be more than happy to talk and think it would be a benefit to both of us.
And if so, I've got everybody pretty much muted right now to cut down on feedback, but I think you can probably unmute yourselves if you want. But I think you can actually raise a hand or something on the chat, on the participant thing if you wanted to kind of let yourself know that you can help Bill out with that. Or if not, just let me know and I will be happy to connect you, cross-connect you on that, because I know it's, there's a lot of difficulties in this area. I know the Innocence Network has done some work on providing translators for people. That's also something that we'd be happy to kind of look at for other folks. And just the question came in from Cynthia, what organization is Bill associated with? Bill is with the Alaska Innocence Project up in Anchorage.
Correct.
I just want to make sure I get that right for you, Bill.
Thank you. And info@alaskainnocence.org is the way to get a hold of us.
And I'll put that in the chat box too.
Great.
And that's info@alaskainnocence.org.
That's correct.
That's what I thought. Okay. I should know.
Not the first
Type it
time
out.
you've written it.
Okay, hopefully that is correct. Okay. Thanks, Bill. So Carol and Murray, I see you here hanging out here too. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself, and actually I think I can do it. There you go. And let us know what your check-in is, what kind of progress you've been made, and what successes you are, and any challenges that you'd like some feedback on. Whoops, Carolyn? I can see you, or I can see that you're here. Oh, you just muted yourself. Okay, Carolyn may be having some technical difficulties on that side. Marla, if you're still with us and you'd like to pop up, you guys have been doing some extraordinary work up in Wayne County, Detroit, and now moving statewide in Michigan. I'd love for folks to kind of hear the great stuff that y'all have been working on, and if you have challenges or issues you'd like to get some feedback on, this would be a great time for you. Oh no, I think Marla also, or you can type it into the chat box if you want to do that too. I don't mind taking that time from that, because Marla, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so Marla says things are going well with the grant. And I know that the partnership with the Wayne County DA's office has been extremely productive for them. So Marla, I'm going to talk, you chat to me if I say anything wrong, is that the Cooley Innocence organization that Marla works for is working in partnership with the Wayne County District Attorney's Office to do a review of cases involving potential forensics. So it takes the load off of the conviction integrity unit to have to do that. And the Cooley, of course, has some terrific expertise in that area, so they're able to share on that partnership. And sorry, just kind of keep an eye on the chat box here. And I don't think she can hear me either. So no, that was from me and her. So we've worked through, they've been working through these kind of issues in terms of communication and what happens if Cooley has heard from the individual before, and they've worked through a lot of all those issues and are now at the point where they're, I would say, Marla, you're probably halfway through your grant and doing a really great job in terms of moving it forward. So sorry to have to be talking for you. If I said anything incorrectly, by all means, let me know through the chat box. But I apologize for any technical difficulties you may be having on communicating. And then see if Carol and Murray, if you're on, Carolyn, if you can hear and talk. And doesn't seem to be. I don't know, Carolyn, why I can't hear you. I'm going to read from Marla right here. She says, we get the cases on the front end for the most part, so they're advising clients about the ethical issues. That's going very well. The only challenge that they are starting to get backed up at the state lab, and we're all busy all of the time, which is in all caps. So that's, I think, a great statement of how successful they've been, and being able to move forward like that. And I know that the head of the CIU for Wayne County, Val Newman, has been working with Urban Institute to put together a data program to be able to collect the data they need to collect at the DA's office, and means of being able to analyze it. And I will be meeting with the folks at Urban Institute to see if that's something that can be replicated and sent out to other prosecutors' offices around the country, because I know that that is a central issue for a lot of folks working under these grants and looking for some guidance with it too. So we can get that out. Marla also says, nope, that's it. Not necessarily a sign of success, but certainly a sign of commitment. And I completely agree with that. So I'm looking, I don't see necessarily anybody else on the call who is a grantee under the current or new grant, but I'll kind of pause for a second and let anybody self-identify if they're on, either verbally or through chat. And if anybody can see it from Carolyn, she says that they've been making progress on an active investigation with the special duty assistant prosecutor who they have gotten loaned to the conviction review unit. They have 2 teams of retired public defender and professional lawyers that are doing their screenings. And if I'm not mistaken, also a retired judge is involved in that. So Carolyn's take on this from doing a statewide unit in New Jersey has been to involve volunteers who are getting pro bono credit and CLE credit for working with her. We did a training for them last month or so, if I'm remembering correctly, for the initial training, and now they're kind of up and running. She says they have about 335 cases pending. Wow, that is a lot. And they got the NIJ grant for doing the post-conviction DNA testing itself, so they're well underway in New Jersey as well. And that is a statewide office. I know, Marla, obviously you're working with the Michigan Attorney General's office. We've been working here in Pennsylvania with our Attorney General as well. And our Attorney General has said that he would like to host a meeting of the other Attorneys General who are looking at or doing statewide conviction integrity units. I'm going to say that's probably not going to be an in-person meeting anytime soon, but certainly something that to be on the lookout for those in a state with a statewide office. Okay, now I'm going to take that pause, I promised, to see if anybody else wants to chime in terms of a progress, how you've been doing on the grant, successes, challenges, or if you just want to kind of say howdy. I see Tom Costello, you've joined us too, which is awesome. Or if anybody else wants to kind of chime in here. Okay, so not hearing anyone, then we'll move forward through the upcoming, oh, I'm sorry. Tom, hi. You can talk, by the way, if you can unmute yourself, figure it out. And I apologize if there's technical difficulties, but Tom reports that at the prosecutor's office, they've been meeting monthly with Urban Institute to develop the comprehensive data system for data collection and management. And they've given us a chance to review and make changes to the application of the review process. And that's all going well. And Cynthia Garza from Texas reports that they have the NIJ grant for post-conviction DNA testing, which I'm guessing is the Bloodsworth grant. And they're moving forward on that as well. And for those who've asked, I don't know yet when the Bloodsworth grant will be let out. And I think, from my understanding, it's going to be later this month or April, but BJA frankly seems to be down to like a population of maybe 12 people who work there. So I think they're all a little bit overwhelmed at the moment. Ariel has a question about the grant. Ariel, if you want to just pipe up, go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I just started looking at the grant and starting to draft it. And I wasn't able, I was a little bit late on this call and I didn't know that there was a section yesterday about the grant. My question is, with the partnership, is that a requirement or is it now just optional? Like,
Yeah,
do I have to partner with an Innocence clinic or outside project, or can my CRU just be the only one on it?
Well, here's the bad news. For you, the grant now is only aimed for entities. The only people who can apply for the grant as grantees are Innocence organizations or nonprofits or public defenders' offices who are looking to form a wrongful conviction review entity. So in other words, it's not aimed at prosecutors anymore at all. But
I'm looking at the front. It says state offices with in-house post-conviction.
So are you looking at the rule of law wrongful conviction program?
Yes.
Okay,
Upholding the rule of law, the BJA, the one that came out February 11, 2020.
Yeah, it's if you look at what an entity, they define entity as wrongful conviction review entity. And that's, as I said, kind of it's a nonprofit, a public, academic institution, or a public defender's office. The way
so
it's
a prosecutor's office will not count as an entity, even if we have our own separate unit.
That's my understanding, but I'm happy to work with you and contact BJA directly to answer that question, but the way it was answered by BJA yesterday is that under the new grant, it's only aimed at wrongful conviction entities now. But there is an aspect where the wrongful conviction entity can partner with a conviction integrity unit or conviction review unit, or even a prosecutor's office looking to set up a conviction integrity unit, but the grantee would still be the Innocence organization or the wrongful conviction review entity. It would not be the prosecutor's office, as I understand.
Can you send me whatever yesterday's one? Because I called
Absolutely.
this morning and I was asking them that if I'm my own, do I have to pair up? And they said I didn't have to, but I guess maybe they misunderstood that I'm a CRU from the state attorney's office.
I think they may have misunderstood, Ariel, but I will definitely follow up with you on that. And we'll get that. Okay. So, and Gerald just also popped up, and this is really for Tom, and wanting to know what changes the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office has made to the application review process, if they have. And Tom, if you're on and can unmute to
I can do that.
answer, let me see. I can do it from here. Whoop. Tom, are you there? Yep. Okay.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So hello to everybody. We just felt we needed to streamline it, more sort of check the box or short answers. We sort of had these long questions or long sections that, rambling and not focusing on it. So that's what we've done. And even aesthetically, to the eye, it looks better, and I think it's easier. So, that's what we did. I'd be happy to, once I don't know if it's blessed as the final copy, but I'd be happy to share it with anyone that.
Yeah, if you're comfortable, Tom, sharing it with us, we'd be happy to, one, kind of include that in our collective best practices and also get it out to folks who want to have it. We're happy to kind of serve as that hub.
I will. I'll send that out. I'll talk to Val and get it out as soon as I can.
Great. Okay. So again, kind of keeping an eye on the chat box and seeing if folks have other questions on that. It doesn't look like it. Okay. So just briefly in terms of the upcoming webinars, as I said, for March, Ellen Yaroshevsky is a professor of ethics at NYU Law, will be joining us. In April, I thought we would move to forensics issues, and we've invited, and he has tentatively agreed, is Michael Garvey. He's the head of the Office of Forensic Science for the City of Philadelphia, and he is a pretty extraordinary forensic scientist himself. I honestly don't know how Philadelphia got lucky enough to get Garvey, but he came to us from NSA and frankly CIA. He has his specialty is in DNA analysis. And so he will be doing kind of a basic presentation on working with a public lab, like what they want to see, what is helpful for them, and taking any questions that are forensics oriented. And we're pretty grateful for him for offering that time. And then really just always open to know what folks want to have these webinars focus on, areas of training you think would be helpful. I've reached out to ETL Drawer. Sarah said that he did a fantastic presentation to the Massachusetts working group that's putting together their best practices for statewide conviction integrity units. For those who don't know, Dr. Drawer is an expert, probably the world's leading expert on cognitive bias and how it impacts reviews, particularly in the criminal justice system. And hopefully he can join us, but he's also, we're trying to get him into the fall to do an in-person training with us as well. And then, so if you have suggestions, feel free to throw them into the chat window, speak up, or email me anytime. I would very much like to do that, and we'll follow up and put those together. And then, as I said, one thing I've been talking to BJA about, because I've heard this from a lot of folks, that you think that having an in-group meeting would be helpful for people. So we're looking to schedule maybe a 2 or 3 day conference, probably in the fall, to offer trainings. Dr. Drawer has said, in fact, he'd like to come and do a pretty prolonged training with everyone on the issues that he focuses on. Others have said that even more basic covering issues like eyewitness misidentifications, false confessions, and other errors could be helpful. Just giving some people some time to talk to each other and share information and build out, again, some of these best practices that we've been talking all along. We would, Penn would, of course, provide CLE credits for people who come. And I did check with BJA yesterday, and I was told that if you built in money to your grant to attend trainings, that's what that would be used for. So it's not that BJA has one training that they require everybody to go to, but this could serve as that. So I wanted to kind of just get people's feedback on that. Again, you can use the chat window or just unmute yourself and speak up about whether that would be helpful for you. If so, if you think that you would want to attend or other folks would want to attend, and just kind of give us a little feedback on that. I'd appreciate it. And question from Tom, do we have a date or month in mind? Not yet. For planning purposes, probably October. Is when things kind of start to calm down around Penn. But it would be really dependent on what the interest level is and what folks need. And thank you, Cynthia says that they would be interested. Okay. Great. And if the money's not built into your training programs, then we at the Quattrone Center might be able to kind of work with you about that. Okay. And getting some interest, great, okay. So that would be helpful. So if there are folks here who would want to kind of help plan that, that would be awesome. And yes, we would definitely have that open for, and not just for unit directors or deputy directors, but really anybody that wants to come. It would be pretty open for that. And if fall timeline, if that would work, then we'd appreciate that. Okay. And guidelines, awesome. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody taking time. This has been a short day for us because we didn't have a particular topic, but I'm very grateful for folks for kind of working through technical difficulties that we have here. I'm going to keep the line open for a little while, but as we seem to have kind of reached the agenda and I'm going to let folks go. There was a question that came through, would the training be on-site or online? On-site would be we would have it on-site, but probably make it available online for people who could only attend remotely. So that it would, although Bill, quite frankly, I'm not going to fully accommodate Alaska time, but we would make sure to have some good stuff in the afternoon for you, but we would be working in the morning too, just so you know. And yes, it would be at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, at the Quattrone Center, somewhere around Penn. And I can say Penn has a beautiful campus, so I think folks would enjoy being here. So again, thank you everybody for your time. Feel free to ditch out, but I will leave the line open in case folks have more questions or kind of want to participate in the ongoing chat, but I do appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Okay. Marissa?
Yes, I'm still here.